Do any of you have questions or concerns that maybe I could shed some light on? Sure. Different countries have different treaties that deal with that, so it depends on the country. You could end up with a will in that country and another will here. Here, everything is governed by one will, but they're all a little bit different. Second time I've gotten that question this week, and I told the first guy, I don't know, you got to go to a lawyer over there. I don't know. I don't know what that treaty says. That was a dispute that, again, wasn't buttoned up, a complete nightmare, County Mayo in Ireland, and it was going to be a doozy. And so because it was a conflict, not an estate plan, I said, look, you need somebody over there, because I didn't know how it was going to end up. A revocable trust, I should have explained this better. A revocable trust is what most of us end up with at some point in time. And it's really a form of ownership. It's a mechanism to avoid probate. You probably all heard that, right? Because when you go to probate, you file an application. It takes, if everybody's on the same page, it takes a month to get an executor appointed. That's on an expedited basis. You could have a fight on it. It could take however. Then you've got to publish the notice of death, and then the creditors have 6 months from there to file their claim. So it's a long, drawn out type of thing. A revocable trust is a mechanism that it doesn't, think of it as a bank account that has a survivorship clause in it. So somebody passes away, it goes to the survivor. So a revocable trust is somewhat the same thing. Somebody passes away, the revocable trust governs where things go. You don't need a judge to say, oh, the car goes here, that goes there, kind of thing. It's all done by the trustee of the trust. Irrevocable, I would say mainly used on life insurance, because the way it works with the government and taxes, if you want to get a benefit from it, you got to give up the control. So with an irrevocable life insurance trust, there's I won't bore you with those details, but there's a process where it sort of gets out of your estate, and that brings your estate down, but you got to file what they call these crummy letters and whatnot, but it's a really useful mechanism. But I'd say that mostly what we deal with are these revocable trusts, and primarily to get the asset out of the probatable estate, so you don't have to deal with probate. And I got to tell you personally, I think the younger you are, you maybe shy away from the revocable trust, because this is a little technical, but you have a revocable trust, and are you putting all your assets in that revocable trust today? Or are you using a pour-over will to say, oh, when I pass away, then everything goes into my revocable trust? Then you're going to probate anyway. But somebody who might be sick or might be older, let's get it all done now. It's as much, again, that was another call I had yesterday. Somebody's, not doing well, and I said, look, let's just avoid all that. You never avoid probate altogether, because if you own real estate, you have to get a tax clearance on your real estate. But that's a much more streamlined process, and it's you're never getting away from it. But the revocable trust is a very useful tool to avoid the probate process. But I don't think Connecticut probate is as awful as some other states. It can be really brutal in California, and I think Florida's gotten better. But it's not the end of the world if you have to go through it. But so does that answer your question?
Wait until she comes with the microphone.
Oh, sure.
So that
okay, that might be
everyone
easier.
can hear the question.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Hi. So I'm over the 7 or 10 year review period, but something's happened to technology in that period, and I have all kinds of passwords and stuff like that. What's the process for handling that? Or is there a process?
Yeah, so funny, that's a great point. And now you'll see in your revocable trust or in your will, it's under the term digital assets. So these digital assets get left, or the executor has access to them, and so it's an authorization, because if you don't have it in there, there's a court would say, give these passwords, open the phone, whatever it may be. But it comes under the heading of digital assets, and it's critical. You're right.
Not a question, just to follow up on that. I think there are companies that you can set all your passwords on, and once the death certificate is verified or something, you get notification, then it gives access to whoever you...
They share it with an individual person or whoever. I've heard of it. I haven't dealt with it exactly yet, but only a matter of time, because it's so awful, potentially. I can't even keep them straight now.
Hi, this is probably simple, everyone knows this but me, but what's the current federal and state exemption on estate taxes?
The federal is up to 13, but I think is moving up to 15 if it hasn't already. And the state, there's a little bit of a cliff there. The state is at 3 to 4. There's a big delta there. I have to double check it, but it's.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, let me just follow up on that. For those of you, the limit is, how much assets can you pass without generating an estate tax? So husband and wife can pass unlimited amounts of money between themselves, there's no tax, and that's where, when it comes down to somebody who you're not married to, you potentially have to pay a tax. No, it was 13 to 15 million of how much 13 to 15 million worth of assets you can pass tax-free. But when you think about it, again, a little technical, but let's say, for example, you pass 10 million to your spouse, you have 10 million. Now when the spouse passes away, now you've got 20, and then you're limited to the 13 to 15 that you can pass tax-free. So there's a marital trust that deals with that. Again, that's sort of the whole tax planning part of it. But again, with a trust, you give up a little control. Your spouse then could take 5% a year, get the income on it. So there's strategies to avoid that. But you see the problem, right? You've got, together you have this, but then when you put it all in one and when you have to pass it, it's potentially a tax problem.
So it sounds like a lawyer is the first stop or first step, and then you're talking about tax. Do you guys meet together? Do you bring them all in the room
Well, it's
together,
funny. It's
or
funny
how
you
does
say
work?
that. So the way I handle it is, I always ask. Look, I think a second set of eyes is great. If there's a financial planner or an accountant to sort of look over the shoulder to make sure we're not selling you something you don't need, and inevitably, the financial advisor or the accountant will say, "Oh, you forgot to mention this asset." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about it." Like significant assets. So I think the second set of eyes is good. And sort of collaborate on it. And generally speaking, we're on the same page, but you can't have enough good advice. And especially your tax person or your financial advisor will know the ins and the outs of your estate. I think it just makes the process that much better.
Have you run into a situation with someone who owns a co-op in New York and how that gets, what the issues are related to that, since we own shares in a corporation?
Right. It's you got to probate it in New York, unfortunately. But co-ops are a little different in that some of them restrict you to own it individually. Right? They don't want to hear about your LLC owning the shares or your trust. It's a kind of an individual thing. If the last one I dealt with about 6 months ago, I tried everything to not have to do the probate, but we had to do it. Unfortunately, but each co-op's a little different. So I would investigate it so you live here and are you residents of Connecticut? Yeah. So I would check with them and see what they'll allow you to do, because putting it in an LLC or a trust would avoid the two. It's just very, again, like Ken said, for your family and stuff, whoever would be probating your estate, it's just a pain in the neck that's unnecessary. So, but it could be fixed pretty simply, like I said, with a trust or an LLC. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have two questions. One is, what is a digital asset? Like your brokerage account with passwords and things like that. That's not a digital asset, right?
Could be, sure. Yeah. I think primarily it's your financial information and stuff, but what if you have, pictures in that Google account or something like that?
No, I mean like a brokerage account, for instance.
Yeah.
That could be a digital asset?
No, I mean, it could be, but I think primarily you deal with the institution and get it that way. So that's not as critical. It's that other stuff. It's the emails. And because the other thing, when somebody passes away, the advice is you got to watch the mail for a period of time, right? But now we're not all getting mail with our bank statements and stuff. It's coming in that email, and you got to have access to it. So it's difficult.
And in Connecticut, can a real estate have a beneficiary?
You can do a transfer on death type of thing. It's not very common, but you can. But also, too, that's if you go and put the real estate in the Rev Trust, that's the best way to do it, I think.
Thank you.
Yep.
Trusts for offspring with special needs.
Yep. So the very, very important. I think those they're called special needs trusts. And I think the moral of that story is they're designed to, the rules are very specific, and you're trying to provide to give that special needs person some amenities that are not covered, and you have to be careful about what you're trying to cover. But
They've changed. There's now other accounts that you can have besides special needs accounts.
I personally refer.
Able accounts.
Oh, really? Okay, you're probably right. That's a whole specialty in and of itself that I refer
So
out.
where do you go for that kind of specialty?
There's people around that do it, absolutely. Yeah, no, but it's very, there's a couple, if you want to talk to me after, I'll give you a couple names if you want. Ann Fowler Cruz comes to mind. I don't know if you know her, but she's excellent.
Similar to your question earlier about co-ops, but if a person suddenly now moves from New York to Connecticut and now they are mentally incapable and those 7 to 10 years have come and gone, what can be done with that?
Couple of things. So more than likely, a power of attorney. So there's different types of powers of attorney. And the one I think you want is what they call a durable power of attorney. And that would mean that you've designated in that first go-around on the estate planning, you've designated someone to be your power of attorney, and it continues if that person is unable to make decisions for themselves, whether mentally or physically, whatever it may be. So in theory, you can take that power of attorney and say, look, I'm taking over here, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. With banking, with what have you, and it should work. But these financial institutions are under attack, because it's just, there's a whole cottage industry of people out there trying to steal money and, what have you. So they're very leery about taking a power of attorney that was signed 15 years ago. So look, I'm the person listed here, and I'm going to take over. They may say, look, we can't do that. So what you do then is apply to be a conservator. And there's guardrails in place for that. We used to do that at probate all the time, but it's a very significant thing because you're taking away those persons' right. They have to be adjudged incompetent, and so to your point, it's not just slipping or getting a little forgetful. It's a big thing. There's notice. There's doctors involved, and at the end of it, that's where you end up. But sometimes you'll get people. Look, they know it's not working out. They know they're slipping on some level, and they can do a voluntary. So there's a voluntary conservatorship and an involuntary. So most people, I would say, they get what's going on here. They may not know the details. They may be slipping, and they'll just say, look, I trust you. I'm going to let you be my conservator. But the problem with the voluntary is that they may change their mind. And so this isn't working out for me at all. This is voluntary. I can get myself out of it too. Whereas the involuntary, it's not done willy-nilly, but at the end of it, and there's a conservatorship for health or for a person's body and health, and there's one for finances. So it depends on what they need. But that's I don't know. Have any of you had any dealings with the probate court? Yeah, there's the probating of estates part of it, and then there's they do marriages, they do name changes, and then there's this type of stuff. When I was the judge, another part of it was Silver Hill. So you'd get if there was a hospital in your jurisdiction, you had to cover it. And what the judge would do is show up and say, you can stay or go. Somebody gets in there involuntary, they can keep them for 72 hours. And then at the end of those 72 hours, it's like, I'm done. This is, I'm out of here. And then we have a hearing. So like, you're a danger to yourself or others. We got to keep you here. It's a very serious type of thing. And we'd see all the terrible stories and some good stories. People get the help they need, and then they move on. And this really isn't for today, but every bad story begins with, I stopped taking my meds. And then that's what was the recurring theme over there. We used to see all the time. Kind of sad because the medications sometimes have different side effects that people weren't wild about. But it's a whole nother topic on status of mental health in our country and trying to find good care and stuff like that. But but Silver Hill does an amazing job. And I got to see it from the inside. So it was good.
I'm coming right behind you.
I'm trying to understand better the downside to probate if you have a fairly plain vanilla situation, right? You have your ducks in order, you have financial assets, you have a house or two, but it's very well laid out in one's will.
It's just really just time, quite honestly. Like I said, it could take so when somebody passes away, there's nobody with any legal authority to do anything, right? They have to be appointed by the court. So if everybody's on the same page, it's like any contract or agreement. It's only as good as the people behind it. You could have a rogue family member or whatever it may be could really put a a wrench in the works kind of a thing. But for the most part, I think the probate courts here are great. They're very user-friendly. That's why I asked if anybody did. You go in, it's like, I got a problem. And our clerk will say, okay, how do we fix it? It's unlike, when you go to, I don't want to say DMV, but you go to Superior Court in Stamford, there's bulletproof glass, and this is very, and if there's a hearing, you sit at a table like that one. It's like, and especially, there are kids that lose their parents, and they're trying to, say, look, I've got this trust, and my trustee isn't really doing the right thing. And we sit there and we try to hammer it out, whatever it may be. So to your point, I think the Connecticut probate courts are excellent. I think they're user-friendly, but it's a function of time. And if there's a disgruntled, I should have been the trustee, or the executor, or, mom signed that will, and she wasn't. We see this all the time. There's a new will. So one sibling brings mom over to some lawyer not the lawyer that they used for 50 years, somebody that, they didn't know at all. And all of a sudden we've got a new will with different terms. And, we knew mom was kind of shaky at that point. How did this happen? Did she have the capacity? So it's that kind of stuff that, because you all get bombarded on television with the advertisements for, do it yourself or LegalZoom or whatever it may be. I mean, if everything's fine, it will continue to be fine. But it's that you want that will or that trust to stand up when there's a problem or a conflict of some sort.
With the bank accounts, they typically have the beneficiaries listed for transfer on death. If those are listed, then do you need those assets listed in a will or a trust?
Well, it's funny you say that. So there are assets like for an estate tax return, and then there are probatable assets. So that a bank account with beneficiaries on it or an insurance policy, don't need probate for that at all. And that's sort of the same thing that a revocable trust does. You don't have to go to, for those assets that are already in the trust, you don't have to go to probate. But it's the car that is in the decedent's name alone, or it's that bank account that we didn't know he or she had, that kind of stuff. And then there's some practical things that the probate court has. There's what they call a small estate administration. So let's say you've got $10 million, but with beneficiaries on it. But we got these little assets here that, amount to 20 grand. You can probate that by affidavit. So there is some practicality to it if you need it. But it's that stuff that's in one person's name alone that has to get probated.
Sorry, she has a follow-up.
Oh, sure.
I had read somewhere that there's a House bill making its way through Congress regarding a transfer on death for real estate. Is that such a thing? Have you heard of this?
I think it's already out there. Was there more to it than just that? Yeah, no, I think it kind of exists already if you want to do it. And like I said earlier, the trust is the way to do it. But one thing, I'm sure you all know this, and we live in Connecticut, but you never avoid probate completely. Because if you own real estate, when somebody passes away, whether it be in a trust or whether it be individually, if you own real estate, you've got to get an estate tax clearance and a probate lien fee. So it means you're going to probate, not necessarily say where that asset goes, but to clear that lien. And it's an automatic thing when they pass. But it's called a TPO estate, tax purposes only. It's filing a tax return for the most part. Not a huge deal, but it's a hurdle you have to get over. Then they charge you at the probate court, even though the house, let's call it, worth $1 million, if you've got $5 million, your probate fee is based on the total estate, not just the asset that we're trying to get the clearance on. It gets you coming and going.
Yeah, sorry, 2 questions. If I have assets in a Charles Schwab investment account, is that handled similarly to a bank account? If I have it, it
sure.
is. So that doesn't go into probate.
Well, it depends how you have it set up. If it's in your name alone with no beneficiaries, then yes, it would have to be probated. And most of them are. I don't, if you have a payable on death kind of a thing or a beneficiary, then you could avoid it.
And if it's in the name of me and my wife, for instance, and I were to pass away, then what happens?
Funny you say that. We had this question today, but on real estate, but the same idea. Do you and your wife own it as survivorship, or do you own it, meaning is it 50% you, 50% her? And what happens? It depends how it's set up. More than likely, it's set up either or kind of thing, so it would pass to your wife should something happen to you. But it all depends, and that's what we do in these estate plans. Is you again, that list is over there. You'll put it together. But how is that Charles Schwab account held? That's the question. So what happens when you pass away? And that's part of the due diligence kind of thing and the research that we do. We'd hate to miss something like that, to have to go probate it if there was no need to do it.
Okay, and this is a really basic question. If you have 3 assets and one of them, for whatever reasons, you haven't done your groundwork and goes into probate, or it's real estate, it goes to probate. That's the only asset that goes into probate. The other 2 are resolved or transferred without a problem, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But, there's always a but, the asset gets probated, but your estate tax return is based on all the assets, whether they go through probate or not.
And what's the significance of the thing you just said?
Because depending on where your estate is, you're going to get hit with an estate tax bill, perhaps, or a probate fee. And the probate fee is based on all your assets, not just on that one asset that you're probating. Oh, sure.
On just a technical question, is executor and fiduciary the same, or the difference of them?
Yeah, so the executor is somebody you name in your will to handle your estate. And by handle your estate, make sure all the paperwork gets filed and make sure assets get where they need to go. A fiduciary is a much broader concept where it includes executor, it includes trustee, meaning you've got an obligation to other people to act in their best interest. So an executor is marshaling the assets and really has a fiduciary obligation to the beneficiaries and everything else.
Can they be the same person, or it's
Sure.
usually, okay?
Yeah.
And can you have multiple in both positions, or is it best to have one person
It
responsible?
depends on the situation. We did one last week where I've got a brother and sister, both one. They're the 2 beneficiaries. They're the 2 executors. It's all the same. They just felt better, and they're not at odds at all. But with DocuSign now and stuff, it's pretty easy to do more than one if it works out. But that's a situation where they're on the same page. But on a healthcare proxy, for example. People say, oh, name all 3 of my kids. Like, wait a minute, that's the whole point. If you're in a hospital, somebody's got to make a decision, right? And I can't have, you don't want, I used that example earlier of that gentleman who got intubated way too many times, and it was painful, it was awful. That's why I think you want to pick one person, and I think geography also plays a part in that. You don't need your son in California being that person, because they're not here if you're in the hospital. So it depends on everybody's that's why it depends on everybody's family circumstances. And when you sit and talk with you go through all that. Well, how's your son John with money? Or I get it all the time. Oh, this one is perfect for the health stuff, but awful on the financial stuff, and vice versa. If that makes any sense. Maybe take the microphone so everybody else can hear you.
What are additional considerations where the beneficiaries are minor children and only minor children?
Sure. So what we do, that's a great question. The question was, how do you handle minor children? So when Ken and I started out, we had a lot of our contemporaries doing wills and stuff like that, and your children are young. You don't know how they're going to be in a number of years. So I don't know about you, Ken, but we for the most part, say everything goes into what they call a pot trust. Let's say you've got 3 kids. At least I don't. You don't say, well, I'm going to allocate $100 a week for each kid. It all goes in. If this one needs tutoring, if this one has a sports camp, it just all kind of goes in one big pot, right? So let's say both parents pass away. It's the money's in that pot, and we usually segregate it after that youngest one gets out of college. Now you've got 3 trusts. But to your point, as far as when I was 25-year-old lawyer, I thought, well, at 25, you knew everything, right? But you don't. And then as I got older, and I saw different things play out, now, for the most part, we say a kid would get half at 30 and the other half at 35. But all the while, there's what they call a HEMS standard for these trusts. And HEMS stands for Health, Education, Maintenance, and Support. So if you have a child, they should be taken care of as if you were still here. So if they need tutoring, if they're going to Harvard early, of course, give it to them. Or if they need some remedial help, have health issues, whatever it may be, everyone is a little bit different. And then they get it outright at 35. But that's somewhat arbitrary. We ask everybody what they think. And again, when a kid is 7 years old, you just don't know. But I've had a number of, because of my age, recently where we had all those things in place and they're coming back 7 or 10 years later and like, oh, these kids are squared away. They just got out of college. We can do away with that. And for the most part, but again, we have an idea of how they are mature-wise. Are they, in jobs and whatnot? Because again, people work really hard all their lives and they hate to see that money get wasted. I always use the example of the fancy sports car at 21 years old or something like that. All right, let me get the microphone just so everyone else can hear you. I'm sorry, I missed you.
That's okay. How are bequests handled, either from
Great
a
question.
probate standpoint or?
Again, sorry for the lawyerly answer, but it depends. So what we tell people, again, you can put specific bequests in your will all day long. My silver goes to this person, this ring goes to that person, my gun collection goes here, makes total sense. But for the most part, like my mom, for example, was giving stuff away to her granddaughters over time, and the list, so what we tell people is put a list together, and we stick it in with the will. It's not legally binding, but it seems to work out for the most part. You know what I mean? So on the top, it's just like, I know it's not legally binding, but I want my executor to give X, Y, and Z. Does that sort of, so it's a little less formal, but it seems to do the job, because otherwise you can take up pages and attorney time drafting these things that, you might give this stuff away in advance. So, and then you could always just swap out that letter over time if things change.
So I don't have all the answers, but I will say pro tip, figure out how to do legacy contact on Apple. We were having a terrible time getting into my dad's phone with all the verifications with the digital accounts and stuff, and Apple will not release the reins. So there's something called a legacy contact. And I don't
is that
know
what they mentioned?
It's in your settings and stuff, so it's just something to investigate if you, you
interesting.
can designate almost like, it's not a lawyerly thing.
Well,
but
and
it's
here's
a
something that, what I do personally is that things are ever changing. And I for the last 20 years, that week between Christmas and New Year's, I sort of, because my wife, God love her, she's a nurse, but this stuff she's just not into it. But I write out every year, who's my insurance agent? Where are my accounts? All this kind of a stuff. And she doesn't even know it's there, but if I got hit by a bus, she'd find it. You know what I mean? And that's what I do myself, but it's kind of along those lines, just to make sure that information is available. Because like the way we live now, I mean, this stuff's not coming in the mail, and people won't give you this stuff. It's a struggle to get it, and nothing's perfect, but it works.
So with minors, I was just trying to understand the decision points for us. So I know we have to appoint a guardian, but is that same individual also doubling up as executor or conservator?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was about naming an executor, and can it be the same person? Absolutely, it can. The fight, and again, personally speaking, when we were doing this, my wife said, "Oh, my sister would be a great person to watch the kids," and I agreed with her. And I said, "But my brother's kind of in finance. Why don't we make him in charge of the money? So he would be the trustee of the trust." And after a day, my wife said, "Do you mean my sister would have our 4 kids and she'd have to ask your brother for money?" I said, "Well, yeah, with little checks and balances." And she was like, "Whoa." So yes, they can be, but everybody's got to have that discussion that themselves on how to deal with that, because everybody's situation is a little different. And then on the guardian too, you always want to name a backup if you can. So Mr. Gamble, vocal trust? Oh, yes. Yep, we went through that, and we're almost doing it as a matter of course now. I'm sure your office is the same. Interesting. So yeah, no, exactly right. And this is just a little debate maybe. It's like, let's say somebody comes in 30 years old and they've got a couple of kids. Do you recommend, I don't for the most part, do you recommend putting all the assets in the Rev Trust now, knowing life's going to change because they're so young? It's a little later, right? Yeah, I agree. But we get more people who don't sign because they can't agree on that guardian. It's amazing. Like, it takes years. All right, we finally figured it out. I'm like, get the wrong person in there. Just get it done, because it holds up everything. It really does.
Actually, I have 2 questions now. Well, first of all, one was, what are the reasons not to do a revocable trust, if any?
Great question. It's cost, because you're sort of front-loading the attorney work. It's a matter of making sure, again, if you're organized and can do a lot of the legwork, that's great, but you got to pinpoint those assets and make sure that the Schwab account, the house, the car, whatever, like, it's all in the trust. So your front's a little more expensive, but pay now, pay later. But the huge advantage is making it easier for those people who are going to probate your estate.
So there's not, other than the cost of.
Yeah, that's
creating
really
the
about it.
trust,
And there's
okay.
California and Florida, there are very much estate tax benefits to doing it. We don't have those benefits here other than the ease, but that's why you'll see some national advertisements, do this, save now, avoid, in Connecticut, it's pay now, pay later, but you're paying one way or the other.
And my second question was, I don't have $13 million, but I have a 401k. At the end of every year, are there some techniques available to pass that along without putting that tax burden on whoever's going to?
Not that I know of, because I think a lot of times they'll step into your shoes on the mandatory distributions and everything else, so they're married to it. And I think Ken will remember from his tax class, that the government doesn't want that all tied up. They want it out there and to be taxed and everything else. That's the sort of the concept behind it.
You don't know any tricks.
You can't lock it up forever.
Thanks. You can give it away to charity. I know that. Then there's no taxes.
Right.
Two questions again. The first is, which state are you governed by? So if I were to move to California.
Great question. I should have brought it up myself. So if you sign a will in Connecticut, it's good anywhere, and vice versa. You sign a will in California, it's good anywhere. But it doesn't necessarily, every state has its own different state tax laws. So you could bring your Connecticut will to California. It might be fine. It might be, and we've got, Ken and I have clients moving all over the place. And I said, look, you got to go down there and get it looked at. Maybe it's fine. And even back to that 7 to 10 year rule, we tell people to come back. Maybe nothing needs to be done, but at least it's been looked at and it's, at least you can check it off. So if it's, like I said, if it's valid where it's signed, it's valid anywhere.
The question was, do I pay taxes in Connecticut or California? And which state governs?
Depends which one you're a resident of.
Okay, so you need to establish residency.
And that's a very, over time, you see states, fighting over people to, so it's a matter of, there's a checklist that you'll use. So maybe it's more advantageous to be a resident of another state. And it's generally speaking, got to be not in that state, but out of this state for 6 months and a day. But, where your car is registered, where do you vote, where's your electric bill, all that kind of stuff. Because if it's a sizable estate, these states will go at it and say, no, he was a resident here. And, and sometimes it's worth the fight.
Okay, and what if you have lived abroad for a while?
I think it's your intent. Ken, is that right? So where do you intend to come back to? And we see that on a lot of different things. And people get sick, and I always wanted to come back, and then that gets a little gray, but usually there's a way to figure it out. Again, did you keep the house here? Did you rent it out? Did you, keep voting remotely? Did you pay taxes? All that kind of stuff goes into it.
Thank you so much for taking more of my questions. First, I want to say I'm going to use the word burden, some hesitation. I just don't know what other word to use at this moment. My husband and I are exploring an estate plan. We have 2 children. One is in college, over 18. One is a minor. Now the word burden. My husband has been watching me care for my mother who has Alzheimer's and my senior dad who's now living with us because we can't leave him alone. I am going to be the executor someday. I'm also the trustee of their trust. Mm-hmm. The burden on my shoulders is insurmountable, caring for them and my children, and of course my household. The question goes to, as my husband and I plan, we talk about this almost every day, most recently. Who do we put in charge as our executor? We don't want our son to feel what I feel. We don't want our daughter, who's a minor, to be my son's.
So we're talking about just the probating of the estate.
Whatever my husband and I mean, we both could, God help us, if we pass on a car trip or a plane ride. We have assets, and we need to watch for the daughter and our son. And
right.
Who do we hire an attorney to be the executor?
Yeah, so I just ended up with one down in Darien. There was an executor named in the will. He got 3 weeks into it and said, I can't do it. This is too much for me. And so there was no family, there was nobody else, so I'm doing it, which is fine. I got appointed by the court, and it's probably a little more costly, but it's moving, right? And everybody's going to get what they're supposed to get, and at least in that case, there was nobody else, but you can talk whoever you're doing your estate plan with, say, look, is there an attorney here or a member of the firm that could step in? That happens quite a bit. And same thing on, we talked about trusts earlier, not the revocable trust, but trusts for later on. There's a lot of corporate trustees that'll do that as well, depending on the dollar amount. So there's a way, to do it. That's why you generally name or an attorney in the firm. Or every probate judge has a list out there. So look, X, Y, and Z were named, it's just not working out. There's that's why I say the Connecticut probate courts are excellent. There's a list of what I'll call friendlies that kind of do it and know how to do it, and the probate court would appoint somebody who they know who can handle it. It's not something to worry about.
I have two questions. One is, I'm a little bit confused about real estate can be in revocable trust, but it still has to go through probate.
Well, it's not what I'll call full probate.
Oh, okay.
A modified probate, and it's just to get a tax clearance. It's essentially filing a tax return. It's not but you give it to the probate court and they issue the tax clearance and you pay the probate fee. There's no getting around it,
Okay.
unfortunately.
And the second one is, what is the idea of putting accounts which are beneficiaries or payable on death designation, putting them into the revocable trust?
I wouldn't. I would leave those the way they
Okay.
are. Well, no, the minors. Well, another great point on the minors, right? So you have to be careful. Let's say you've got minor children or grandchildren you're going to leave money to. You do not want to leave them just as is because they'll get that money at 18 years old. And so what you do is say under the term you would leave that non-probatable asset and list your will as the beneficiary, so then it would fund those trusts that you have in the will. Because that's what you're trying to avoid. You're trying to avoid a child getting a lot of money at 18 years old. Well, thank you for having me.